Here we have the mask put together, right sides facing, and the tie backs inserted into the marked areas on the pattern and pinned in place. This is done just by reaching through, putting them into place between the two right sides together. The straps are sandwiched in between the front and the back lining and pinned carefully into place. Now, I used clips before and I used pins this time, and I was sorry I did, and you'll see why later. We're going to sew a seam 1/4 inch from the edge of the mask all the way around as indicated. So we're just going to put it into place, and we're going to do a little back stitching as we always do at the beginning of every seam. There we go, and back stitch, and we're stitching that dart down towards the back of the mask, and we're just making a 1/4 inch seam the width of my foot all the way across. Now I used pins instead of clips on the mask, so I had problems with the liner puckering as I sewed. I should have used the clips, but I do have a handy little tool that I use. And if you do have puckering on your lining fabric, you can just use this particular type of tool or a chopstick, something like that, to smooth the fabric as it goes under the foot. And that way it will go under the foot much smoother. Notice too that I'm also reversing over the straps several times as I'm sewing around the mask to reinforce them, so that they'll stay in place. You'll see that in a moment here as I come up on a strap. And of course I remove my pin, and now back and forth, and then I continue to the next strap where I cross this thing. There we go, and we're backing up, reversing, and going forward. We do this all the way to the end of the mask, with a little reverse stitching at the end. Now we're going to take the mask and we're going to check the seam all the way around, and now I will carefully clip the seams on the curve now and then turn it inside out and press it. I'm going to be real careful when I clip these curves, and I'm just going to clip on the curve and not across the nose piece where the wire is. There's a reason for that. I'm also being careful not to clip close to where the ties are. The reason I'm not going to clip across the top of the curve of the mask is because that's where the wire is, and having a stiff line there will help the curve, help the strength of the seam. And be careful when clipping not to catch a thread or cut your straps. Very important. So we've got this done, clipped all the way around. Looks pretty good. Check a couple places to make sure that we got nice clipped effectively. Just about up to the threads, so that when you turn it inside out, that it's gonna curve easily. Now trim up your threads and turn it inside out. When you're turning it inside out, of course, you want to push out all the seams as far as they'll go, so that you don't have a funny shape. You fully roll out and pinch your edges to create a sharp edge all the way around the edge of the mask. It just takes a little fiddling and fudging, and once we get those all pushed out and rolled out to the edge, we're going to iron it, and then we're going to sew the second seam. Now we're also making sure that that the wire now is in place and flat where it should be. Now we're going to insert the wire casing into the mask and place it between the interfacing seam allowance and the interfacing of the front piece. By doing that, you're putting the casing inside of the seam allowance, making another casing and providing more padding for the wire. Because this side of the mast is going to rest on your face. So first we're going to place the cased wire across the bridge of the mast and slightly bend it to the shape of the edge. I put my fingers in the center, press down, and then sort of bow the wire down in a little bit of an arc and make sure that the loops on either end are equidistant. Now place the casing of the wire inside of the mast between the interfacing and the interfacing seam allowance to pad the wire casing further. It takes a little bit of work to do, but you'll get it worked in there and you'll feel it's in place. Make sure that the wire is evenly spaced between the straps and tight against the top of the mast seam. And once you do get it pushed up into place there, and you've got a good snug fit, and that it's even between the two straps. You see I'm double checking and showing that it is underneath that interfacing seam. And it shows the wire casing wedge between the front interfacing piece and the interfacing front piece. So now that I have it in place, I'm just double checking to make sure that it hasn't shifted to the right or the left, and it's equally distant on either side. I'm going to nudge the wires firmly into place and clip them to hold them until I sew. So it feels like it's up solid where it needs to be. And I'm just going to grab a clip to pinch it into place. Now we're going to go ahead and make another seam, a top stitching seam, all the way around the edge, about a 1/2 inch in. And as we sew, we're going to come up to our wire area, and when we do, we're going to make sure that we cut in a little bit to avoid those 2 wire loops that are hanging down. We're going to sew that top seam about a 1/2 inch down from the top around the edge of the mask and going around the wire loops. It's just a small move, but you'll see here that I'm sewing just actually at about a 1/4 inch when I first start out, and then as I'm moving up towards that wire loop, I'm moving out to about 1/2 inch. The reason I'm doing this is I want to catch the canvas casing that the wire is in and tack that down as I'm sewing, so that you can see I'm catching the edge of the casing right there, and now I'm going around the wire loop. The reason I want to do that, and now going back up close to the wire again and skimming across the top, the reason I'm doing that is that that is going to keep that wire casing in place. It won't budge, it won't shift, and when wire wiggles, it'll wear through fabric real quick. But this way it's fully encased, fully enclosed, and it's not going to move anywhere for you. So we're just sewing around, and of course this extra stitching is going to help those straps stay in place even more. And when we get to the end of the seam, we're going to do some back stitching as always. So we're getting to the end of our mask assembly now, as I'm top stitching here around the wire and then down the side of the mask. And it won't be long now before we are finishing up the last seam. So it's coming together really nicely. As you can see, there's a lot of detail work, but in the end you end up with a product that isn't going to fail in any way because of your construction. So here I am just getting the mask out, and showing you the seam there, how it's all sewn. We've caught the casing so that nothing moves. That wire is never going to shift. So now we're going to sew that inner seam on the last thing. So we're carefully going to bend the mask down, and we're not going to bend it all the way, just a nice gentle rollover. We don't want to put a kink in that wire at all, so roll it over your fingers so it doesn't kink up on you. Now match your edges closely and trim any extra threads or material that might be in the way at this point. And we're just going to sew a seam now from the base, under the chin, up the nose. And as I'm sewing this seam, I am making a nice curve. I'm not following the suggested shape of the pattern on the mask. And especially here at the nose, I am cutting in like a dart and making a nice curved edge and double stitching at the top there. Now there you can see my curve that I did so nicely instead of following the pattern of the mask. And you can specifically see that top stitching there where I actually made like a dart. Which we're going to trim up our threads. And now we're going to trim that raw seam down to about a 1/16 of an inch away from the fabric. Nice and smooth and close. We'll trim that little bit off there. And there it is. It's finally complete. It's finally ready to put on and wear. So you can see here that we just turn the mask now inside out, or right side out I should say, and just straighten out the wire across the top. Now when you put it on, you will adjust the wire to fit your face, and you can change it many times. It's good malleable wire. It is reversible, so you can turn it inside out and wear it if you don't mind the raw seam showing. And really, it doesn't look that bad, so it can be worn either way. But I suggest wearing them just one way. Pick your side and stick with it. That way you know which side is clean at all times. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope you will subscribe and look for more videos from me on stitching up history. Stay safe, stay kind, wear your mask, wash your hands, and we'll talk to you again.